The New York end of the Brooklyn Bridge. The dark figures in the center of the bridge, you can just barely see them going out of frame now, are people, protesters. The numbers vary wildly. The most conservative ones are extraordinary still. Between Foley Square in Manhattan, to the left of where the camera is on the helicopter now, across the Brooklyn Bridge you just saw, to Cadman Plaza on the Brooklyn side. Anywhere from 10,000 to 20,000 to, by one estimate, 35,000 protesters have taken to the streets of New York City tonight on the 61st day of Occupy Wall Street. Which of these stories will you be talking about tomorrow?
He's bleeding! He's bleeding!
1,000 or more protesters mass in Union Square, New York. Hundreds in and around City Hall, Los Angeles. Police seal off New York's Zuccotti Park. A woman arrested, though she is in a wheelchair. Another man arrested, a former Philadelphia police captain. And the son of the New York police commissioner goes on the local Fox News show he hosts and makes up a story about Occupy trying to shut down the New York subway system. Day 62 of Occupy. As many have said, you probably should have let him just stay in the park, Mikey.
Even in the face of this antagonism, the police maintained incredible restraint.
From Seattle, an apology to Dorley Rainey. To those engaged in peaceful protests, writes Mayor Mike McGinn, I am sorry that you were pepper sprayed. The mayor calls her. We'll have Dorley Rainey's response. Lazy is as lazy does.
We've been a little bit lazy, I think, over the last couple of decades.
Can you believe that? That's what our president thinks wrong with America? That Americans are lazy? That's pathetic.
Yeah, actually, he clearly called American presidential administrations lazy about seeking new business. And you, Rick, you are either a hillbilly moron or a liar. Or both. And nice ratings.
BP had a 16% approval rating at the height of the oil spill. And we're at 9%.
Worse than that, 9% approval for Congress, 11% approval for having this country go communist. All that and more now on Countdown.
Comrades!
Good evening from New York. This is Thursday, November 17th, 355 days until the 2012 presidential election. Tonight, on the 2-month anniversary of its birth, Occupy Wall Street is truly Occupy New York City. It's planned to shut down Wall Street and stage a major march and rally as part of Occupy's International Day of Action. Unconfirmed reports from a local TV news chopper tonight that police think as many as 10,000 Occupy protesters are marching on the Brooklyn Bridge alone or marched across it in the last hour, while other unconfirmed reports claiming that, including those already off the bridge, the total crowd might have reached anywhere from 20,000 to 35,000. The fifth story on the Countdown: Wall Street was not shut down, but Occupy has been marching all day and is still marching tonight from Wall Street to Zuccotti Park to Union Square to the courthouse district of Foley Square and on to the Brooklyn Bridge. In a day of rallies and clashes with police that saw now more than 200 arrests. On Wall Street this morning, mounted police guarded the New York Stock Exchange. Perhaps they were waiting for Paul Revere. When police checked work IDs as early arrivals made their ways to banks and brokerage houses, while at Zuccotti Park, protesters gathered, watched there by the NYPD and park security guards.
The institutions that sort of set the tone of the country don't represent the people of the country.
There are so many corporations who have the ability to not pay a lot of taxes because of a lot of loopholes in the system, and I think we need to fix that.
I'm here to support Occupy Wall Street.
More than 1,000 protesters marched to Wallet Street, hoping to close the exchange or at least force it to delay opening. They were met there by the NYPD. Some protesters tried to occupy the asphalt. Many arrested. The stock exchange opening bell rang on time. Among the arrestees, a woman in a wheelchair. This picture tweeted by Michael Moore, who wrote that when police couldn't figure out how to take her to jail, and they just gave her a ticket instead. Also arrested this morning, former Philadelphia police captain Ray Lewis, an Occupy supporter who said, "As soon as I'm let out of jail, I'll be right back here and they'll have to arrest me again." As for those two counter-protesters there's a sign shown right next to them, not in the picture, which asks, "So my 401k is safe?" There were also more name arrests. The president of the SEIU union, Mary Kay Henry, and two New York City council members, Jumani Williams and Melissa Mark Vivitero, were arrested at Brooklyn Bridge. The New York Civil Liberties Union also reported 3 Homeland Security vans on the Brooklyn side of that bridge. Earlier, protesters had gathered at Zuccotti Park, and a serious clash broke out with police. Some protesters began grabbing and dismantling barricades set up to keep them from restoring their camp, and the NYPD fought back. This protester reportedly beaten after he knocked a police officer's cap off his head. He paid with blood as well as his arrest. At least 5 officers were also sent to hospitals for minor injuries. One needed 20 stitches after he was hit with a shard of glass. Others had a stinging liquid, possibly vinegar, thrown in their faces. Despite scenes like that, New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg, no friend to Occupy Wall Street, was all but benign as he described the first part of this day.
There have been, I think it's fair to say, minimal disruptions to people, and most protesters have, in all fairness, acted responsibly. But those that break the law, those that try to assault other people, particularly our first responders, are going to be arrested.
From Zuccotti Park, thousands of Occupy protesters marched north to Union Square for a rally in that venerable location of rallies. Actress Anne Hathaway joining the 99%, somewhat incognito. And a night march followed downtown from Union Square back to the Courthouse District and Foley Square. The crowd there growing to perhaps as many as 10,000, 15,000 perhaps, as union members joined the protesters who'd been working throughout the day. Occupy Wall Street then occupying Brooklyn Bridge. Organizers calling it a festival of lights to celebrate 2 months of a new movement to reclaim our democracy. About 60 protesters arrested on the bridge, including the New York City councilman referenced earlier, Mr. Williams. Occupy Wall Street also staged an event called Occupy the Subway to, quote, take our own stories to the trains, a goal profoundly distorted on local Fox's New York Fox station. The anchor Greg Kelly suggesting at least 4 times that Occupy had indicated it wanted to shut down the subway system at mid-afternoon. Greg Kelly is NYPD Police Commissioner Ray Kelly's son. Coincidence, no doubt. Despite the family connection, New York Deputy Mayor Cass Holloway would have none of it.
The crowd is growing, and there are indications that they want to shut down the New York Stock Exchange and also perhaps New York City mass transit. Are you advising New Yorkers to avoid the subway at 3 o'clock this afternoon? No.
Deputy Mayor Holloway suggested instead that New Yorkers simply stay informed. Those who did ride the shut-down subways around 3 p.m. today may have seen scenes like this. Occupy protesters handing out leaflets and taking their stories to the trains. Let's start our coverage today with more on today's Occupy New York march. Adam Gabbatt, the reporter for The Guardian newspaper. It's good to have you, sir.
Thank you.
Give me your read on what we know at this hour of events at Brooklyn Bridge. Is there any reliable reporting on what size that crowd was?
Some colleagues of mine who I've been reporting with for the past couple of weeks have said that the people are still continuing over the bridge. Last I was there was about 10 to 7, and the crowd then was backed up all the way from the bridge back to Foley Square.
Goodness.
That is about... must be getting towards a kilometre, or as I should say, 2/3 of a mile, of course. And and thousands of people, literally thousands.
Is there any sense that anybody had an idea that the crowd would grow to these proportions tonight, whether the protesters or the police? Because it certainly seems like the police reaction in the last hour has been more like, whoa, and we're just going to stand over the side and get out of everybody's way.
I think the police had a huge presence, but I think they were surprised. And I'm sure organisers were surprised as well. Occupy Wall Street, in its preparation for today, in its press releases, they did say they expected tens of thousands at Foley Square. But as a reporter, you sort of take these things with a pinch of salt. I was expecting maybe up to 10,000, but nothing like this. And the numbers this morning were kind of fairly small, what we've seen before. So not small, but, you know, in the low thousands. But certainly the numbers this afternoon were just incredible, and I think everyone involved was surprised.
You were at Zuccotti Park today for the violence there. Do you have an inkling as to actually what started that? We've heard everything from batteries being thrown at police to possibly vinegar being thrown in the faces of police, and you say, well, how serious is that? You don't know it's vinegar when it's thrown in your eyes. You have no idea what that could be. It could be a caustic chemical. It could be something dreadfully serious. Other stories that this all began when that man knocked a police cap off a policeman's head. Any idea where the mayhem began?
It's always difficult to tell where the mayhem began, and sometimes, of course, it's better the next day as footage from so many citizen journalists who are very helpful to reporters and of course, anyone who's wanting to read these riots, but these protests, sorry. In terms of how it started, it's very difficult to get a sense. I was close to it, but I was just around the corner, so the first I saw was when I came back to Zuccotti Park, and of course there's people walking around with blood over their faces, very dramatic scenes. As a police officer, if something is thrown in your eyes that stings, you're obviously not going to take that lightly and going to be quite scared, I imagine. The knocking of the cap, if that proves to have been the cause, then clearly that is not something that would provoke such a reaction, you'd hope.
One would think not. Give me your assessment from talking to people throughout the day. The size of the crowd, and again, no one could have forecast what this was going to be tonight, but does this originate solely from the idea of the raid the other night? Was that a tipping point in a way that perhaps certainly Mayor Bloomberg didn't understand as we're seeing the projection of the 99% logo on the side of one of the big bank buildings downtown this evening, an extraordinary thing that's being commented on by everybody who marches past that. That's the live helicopter shot. We don't have control over what it is. Were they multiplied by the fact that the camp was raided overnight the other night?
I think they absolutely were. We've seen this with other camps before. I was in Oakland a couple of weeks ago, and their size for the general strike was buoyed by the fact that they'd kind of had action taken against them by police previously. And from speaking to people, some had travelled really quite a long way. I spoke to a couple of girls who'd come from Virginia, where they'd set up an Occupy camp in Norfolk, only 100 people. They'd caught a 6-hour bus ride to be here at 6 a.m. this morning, and were leaving at 5:30 p.m. to go back to Norfolk to reoccupy their camp there. Wow. And that, I mean, obviously not everyone came as far as that, but it brought people out who might have been aware of the protest, might have been down once or twice, but really wanted to show the support. And I think what it shows is that while people might not necessarily have been involved at Zuccotti Park and involved in the actions, there was, I think, a kind of underlying message of support for people from a lot of people in New York, and I think this has brought out, you know, a lot of new protesters to it.
Yeah, and as we were saying that, look at the shot that we're seeing on our screen now, a series of the different locations being projected in that bright light against the wall of the building in downtown Manhattan, which I think says it all. I guess Mayor Bloomberg and the people he represents got what they wanted. They closed it down. It's not going to be an issue anymore. Occupy is done, isn't it? Adam Gabbatt, the reporter for the Guardian newspaper, all over the place today. Great to have you on the program, and now I guess get back to work.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
I will.